I wasn't nervous at all. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R. And thankfully, a Seattle Kraken win as they take care of business in St. Louis, defeating a Blues team who's, like we already said, sold off pretty much everybody that isn't named Kyrou or Binnington. And, well, the Kraken desperately needed these 2 points, and fortunately managed to hang on to get them. So it may not have been the prettiest victory ever for the Kraken, but in the end, all that matters is those 2 points in the standings, and that for, I think it's already the 3rd time this season, they don't allow a losing streak to get past 3 games. Obviously, it's not ideal that they've had 3 or so 3-game losing streaks, but it is nice that they've been able to prevent that from carrying on to 4 or longer. And since we did spend some time talking about the standings in the last video and that loss against the Maple Leafs, it's worth reminding just how close things are in the Pacific especially, but really the entire Western Conference, that with this win, the Kraken have already jumped back from that second wildcard spot up into the top 3 in the Pacific. Though that is partially due to, while they're tied now in points with the Edmonton Oilers, they have played 1 fewer games. With that said, and since I've also been once again blessed with a sore throat, let's get into the game, where there were a couple of lineup changes going in for the Kraken. First of all, the lines got shifted a little bit around, but mainly the Beniers and Gord lines stayed the same, so just shifting between those other two, as well as Jones back in net for Grubauer, who had the first kind of off game in a while for him against Toronto, and then also Sprong finally back in the lineup in place of Froden. But all that switching up of lines, or little bit of it that there was, and changes in the lineup, did not seem to really make much of a difference as far as getting more energy into the lineup, as for the first time in 3 games, it was the opposing team that got off to the hot start. Fortunately, although St. Louis does get the first 7 shots on goal of this game, they aren't able to score on any of them, as at least for the Kraken, the one person that managed to show up to play on time in this game was Martin Jones in net, as he makes saves on all 7 of those. And then for the Kraken, well, as we saw all too often last season against them, with all the momentum going against them through the start of the game, eventually their second shot on goal the other way comes off of a 2-on-1 for Geekie and Tanev, actually Larson being the one that gets the puck out of the zone to Geekie, and then Tanev gets up into the play to draw that lone defender on the 2-on-1 away from Geekie so he can get a clean shot off, and he actually decides to take that shot instead of trying to force a pass to Tanev, and he puts it perfectly into the top corner, far side past Binnington to give the Kraken that 1-0 lead on just their second shot on goal, at this point 8-2 in that category. So although it did take them a little bit longer to get that 1-0 lead in this game than it did Boston or Toronto, they were at least able to get it, and unlike in those games, they're actually able to build some momentum off of it. And while they don't score for a second time in this first period, they do really control the period the rest of the way, as I think they only allowed 3 more shots for the Blues, and by the end of the period, the shots had gotten close to even. I want to say it was 10-11 at the end of the period. Still in St. Louis's favor, but certainly a lot closer than that 7-0 start for shots on goal in the first few minutes. It was, however, a strong last 10 or 15 minutes of that first period for the Kraken that they were not able to carry over into the start of the second, as for the second period in a row, they came out of the locker room lacking much energy at all, and it was mostly still all Blues, though not quite as heavy as the start of the first period was. And this time it comes to an end as the parade into the penalty box that was the second period gets started with the Blues having the power play first. Power play which got its chances, but the Kraken are able to kill off. And then shortly after, get their first power play of the game. But of course, although the Blues weren't able to score on their power play just before this, just a few seconds into the Kraken power play, although they actually win the opening faceoff, they have issues trying to force the puck around instead of just taking shots. It leads to a turnover and a partial break sort of going the other way. Although Schultz is there to defend this shot, and honestly, there wasn't really that many other options for the Blues player who takes the shot, so I would have maybe liked to see Schultz play this a little tighter and not make this as clean of an opportunity. But even with that being said, the shot comes from far enough out that this should have been one that Martin Jones makes a save on. He doesn't, and it's a shorthanded goal to tie the game at 1. At least for the Kraken, they are able to try to respond during the rest of this power play, holding the offensive zone pretty well. In fact, I think they won the next faceoff again, and this time kept it in that end of the ice, getting a number of shots on goal and a couple good scoring chances, but just can't find that power play goal. However, right as the power play comes to an end, the 5th guy gets out on the ice, but I don't even know if he got across the blue line for the Blues, As Jared McCann gets the puck on one last around the horn pass, he fires it on net and beats Binnington right through the 5-hole and into the back of the net to give the Kraken the 2-1 lead. So technically it's not a power play goal, but effectively it still is. And either way, for McCann, it's his 27th of the season, which ties him for the franchise record for goals in a single season for the Seattle Kraken. Of course, a record that he set last year with 27, a career best at that point, and now tied for that with still 22 games remaining. But of course, just seconds after the ensuing faceoff, the Blues are right back to the power play and the Kraken back to the kill for the second time in the game and second time in this period already. Fortunately, the Blues don't end up scoring on this power play as it's cut short by a penalty going the other way, and we'll go to 4-on-4 for about a minute before the Kraken will get an abbreviated power play of their own at the back end. Right before which, on that 4-on-4, there's a miscommunication between Dunn and the bench as he goes off for a change, but then they tell him to get back out on the ice because they're about to be on the power play that he'll be quarterbacking. And while that's happening, the Blues find a wide open, I think it was Sod, that gets across the blue line, has another partial break as Dunn is able to get right up to him just as he takes the shot, but once again, forced to take the shot from a bit outside. It goes past Jones, who again probably should have had the save here, and ties the game at 2. So unfortunately, a couple of, well, this one technically wasn't special teams, but essentially special teams mishaps, and a couple of pretty soft goals allowed by Jones, who was fantastic in the first, but now with these soft ones let in, we find ourselves tied here about halfway through the second. And on top of that, the Kraken are not able to respond on the little bit less than a minute of power play that they get just after this one goes in. However, back at 5-on-5, they are able, with things evened up on the ice in regular play and not having to deal with special teams for a short window here, able to find the back of the net again. It comes off of another one face-off, this time in the offensive end by Morgan Geekie, who wins it clean back to Schultz. Schultz eventually fires off the shot on net, and Geekie, after winning the faceoff, goes right towards the net, and it ends up working out for him as the shot from Schultz gets tipped out in front by Sprong with a really nice stick to deflect this one before Binnington can get a glove on it. It goes right across the face of Binnington, out to the side for Geekie, who all he has to do is tap it into the back of the net for his second of the game, and gives the Kraken the 3-2 lead. So for Geekie, who got his first goal in I think exactly a month with his goal in the first period, doesn't have to wait that long to score again, as he gets his 6th and 7th in the same game after having waited quite a while. Once again though, not long after this goal goes in, it takes a little bit more than a few seconds, it was closer to a minute, but the Blues end up getting their 3rd power play of the period, and this one goes the distance, which is I guess a good thing because it means that they don't end up scoring on it, as the Kraken kill off all 3 Blues power plays in this second period, although they still get scored on at the shorthanded one and then 4-on-4. But again, because the Kraken are able to respond to both of those, we do get to the end of this second period with the score 3-2 Kraken. And actually, they got a pretty good push trying to make it 4-2 at the end of the second period, once again trying to get some momentum going into the break. And this time, they are kind of able to carry that over into the third. They at least get off to a decent start, and then things even out for a bit. But then they press again, right up until the Blues are going to get another power play. Fortunately, again, the penalty kill steps up, getting actually a pretty good shorthanded chance on this one. But in the end, neither team scores on this power play. Thanks though to the strong kill, the Kraken are able to get the momentum back coming out of it. And eventually, with a fantastic shift from the Gord line, holding the offensive zone for a long time. Also, the pairing of Alexiak and Borgen out there defensively, which was key as both of them made very nice plays to keep the zone throughout this press by the Kraken. They were relentless on the puck, getting to it before the Blues could whenever they got shots that would rebound out. And eventually it works out for them, as it's actually Ryan Donato who gets to a rebound off of a Tolvanen shot, goes around behind the net, gets it up to Alexiak, and Alexiak from the top of the faceoff circle fires off the shot as Gord screens in front, and it goes into the back of the net, with Binnington not able to see where the puck is coming from. And it gives the Kraken that extra little bit of breathing room, as I think we were all a bit nervous about how this game was going to go, with the Kraken just up 1 goal in the final minutes. But fortunately, Alexiak gets that insurance goal, his 8th of the season, building off of a career best for him. And, well, it felt good to have that 2-goal lead. And the deep breath and sigh of relief that this goal allowed Kraken fans to take continued to feel good for about 4 or 5 minutes, right up until the Blues make it a 1-goal lead again. For what it's worth, at least this time, it certainly wasn't on Jones that this one ends up in the back of the Kraken net, as it really just comes off of a nice play and a small window of opportunity that the Kraken defense allows that the Blues are able to take advantage of as a pass gets quickly out from behind the net. Out in front, the one-time shot goes perfectly off the far post and into the net before Jones has really much of a chance other than to make a desperation swing at it with his glove, which he obviously isn't able to connect on. But it does bring the Blues to within 1 with still 4 or 5 minutes left in this game and a chance to even things up and force an overtime that the Kraken really don't want to have to deal with. And thankfully, once again, as a large sigh of relief and a chance to just take a deep breath and collect yourself as a Kraken fan, we would not end up getting to overtime, as though the Blues do pull the goaltender with just under, I think it was 2 minutes left. Eventually, in the final seconds, the Kraken are able to have a number of good shot blocks and a couple of saves to prevent the Blues from getting much dangerous during that 6-on-5. And eventually, the Kraken, thanks in large part to a tenacious play by Yanni Gourde to get the puck out of the zone and then keep it there and then win possession. A couple passes later, it gets to Tanev, who, as he's done a number of times this season, in fact, I think this is already like the 4th or 5th for him, he finds the empty net for his 11th on the year, and that pretty much puts the game away as the Kraken do hang on to win this one 5-3. So again, was it the prettiest win for the Kraken? No, certainly not, especially not against a Blues team that, like we've already talked about, has been the biggest seller at this trade deadline and is still trying to figure out how to put a normal team out on the ice after all the guys that they've lost. But the Kraken get those important 2 points and now can hopefully carry that momentum into the rest of this road trip, especially these next 2 games against a Red Wings team that, while the Kraken were able to beat them when they were hot a few weeks ago in Seattle, now this is a Red Wings team that is starting to fall off again, and hopefully the Kraken don't serve to, go against that theme and can get that one as well. And then the very next day, going down to Columbus to play the Blue Jackets, who actually are playing very well of late, even though they're still, by record, one of the 2 worst teams in the NHL. And that's definitely a game that the Kraken will want to win, not only because it's a team they should beat and they need the 2 points, but also because they'd really like to make sure that Columbus loses as many games as possible the rest of the way, so that they have better odds than Anaheim at getting Connor Bedard. So we really don't want Bedard in division. Which, while we're on the subject, is, by the way, also a game I'll be streaming for, that one in Columbus, 4 o'clock Pacific time on Friday. So hopefully you can join for that, even if it might have to be a little bit late. I understand work schedules and all that, so yeah, the early start there on Friday, but we'll be streaming for that one starting at 3:45. Getting back to this game against the Blues, though, again, the Kraken did what they needed to. They got the win, and even if it wasn't necessarily the complete 60-minute win that you would like to see, they were at least able to come back from any of the mistakes they made and win it in regulation, not even requiring overtime against a team that they should be winning in regulation against. As far as 3 stars for the Kraken, it actually is not that hard to find any, not just because they got the win, but because there were a number of Kraken players that had pretty good games. Obviously, with the first star, Morgan Geekie is going to get that with 2 goals. His second multi-goal game, I think they said, of his career. He's never had 3, but it's been quite a while since he had 2. Maybe it was 3rd multi-goal game. Either way, he's not had very many multi-goal games after having a multi-goal game in his first ever NHL game. But he gets 2, isn't able to get the 3rd for the hat trick. One guy that ends up getting 3 points in this game would be Eli Tolvanen. He'll get the 2nd star with 3 assists in this game. Even if, yes, 2 of his assists are secondary assists, with one on the not power play goal from McCann, and then another that was actually a shot on goal that turns into an assist on the Alexiak goal to give the Kraken that 4-2 lead, and then his one primary assist is on Tanev's empty netter. But even aside from the 3 points he gets, he also had a fantastic game. And actually, that entire line had a heck of a game with Gourde, and actually it was Donato. I think at the beginning I said that line didn't have any changes, but they do have Donato in place of Bjorkstrand, who goes to play on a line with Schwartz and Wemberg. A line that also played pretty well, but the line of Tolvanen, Gourde, and Donato had a very good night, and fortunately was at least rewarded the one time with that goal from Alexiak. And that brings us to the 3rd star of the game, where I did have a bit of a harder decision here as far as who to pick. There are a number of guys that would be worthy of a 3rd star, and probably the one that most would pick would be Daniel Sprong, as he has 2 assists of his own in this game, and in fact, I think both of them were primary assists on both of the Geekie goals. and especially a great game for him coming off of a couple of games as a healthy scratch in place of Frodin, and maybe even a third one. He's been in and out of the lineup of late, and definitely was making it pretty hard for Hackstall to take him out of the lineup again with how he played in this one. But ultimately, the guy I'm going to go with for this third star is not even a guy that ends up getting on the score sheet at all in this one. Now, as I've said before, the stars are not entirely based off of just who scores points, like often seems to be the case as far as the official 3 stars, although that does play a role. There's that one guy that I think was certainly the best defensive player out on the ice for the Kraken in this game, and is someone that has had a bit of a tougher season for the Kraken so far. It was very nice to see him have the type of game we were more used to seeing him play last year, that being Carson Soucy. Again, probably the best defensive player for the Kraken, and although he doesn't end up getting on the score sheet, he did have a few shots on goal and set up a couple of nice plays in the offensive end that could have easily turned into goals and got him on that score sheet. So one more time then for me anyway, in a game where there, even with it not being the most pretty game ever for the Kraken, were a number of players that could get stars. For me at least, it's Geeky 1, Tolvanen 2, and Soucy 3. Sprong certainly worthy of an honorable mention. Both Dunn and Schwartz, making Schwartz's first return to St. Louis after he was injured for both of the Kraken trips there last season. Both of them ended up getting into the penalty box. Bjorkstrand had a great game as well, staying in the game after taking another puck to the face early on in the first period, which, I mean, there's got to be some sort of rubber magnet in his jaw because he just keeps getting hit in the face by pucks or what have you. Hopefully this is the last time this season. I'm sure he would be happy to see the last of a puck hitting his face after this one. Gord would certainly also fit the bill as an unsung hero in this game, and obviously McCann equaling his career and franchise high in goals for a single season for the Kraken with 27. Before we close things out though, and I'd still love to hear your thoughts in the comments section about who you would pick as the 3 stars in this game and your overall thoughts on it. There are a couple of things now that I've missed over these last couple of games that we forgot to mention. One, of course, being that Drieger is back from his injury, and we got our answer as far as what the Kraken plan was, what to do with Jones or Grubauer once Drieger came back. With Drieger back, they decided to waive him and try to get him to the AHL, which, thanks in large part, I think, to that $3.5 million contract, that there aren't a lot of teams that can just take that on. He made it to the AHL, where he's at least doing a conditioning stint there, if nothing else. But as long as both Jones and Grubauer continue to stay healthy and playing well the rest of the way, I don't really see much of a reason that the Kraken would bring him back up until maybe the playoffs if need be. But yeah, his contract is not one that's likely to get him picked off of waivers, so the Kraken were able to get him down to the AHL, and he'll at least have some games down there to get his legs back under him after the 9 months or so without playing any hockey. And it's also certainly worth mentioning that on Friday, as well as the stream that I'll mention again here, is the NHL trade deadline, as the Kraken have, well, I guess they made the one move earlier on, picking up defensive depth in Magna, who's only played the 2 games since being picked up by the Kraken, but it doesn't really sound like they're all that eager to make any big moves, which, although it could be frustrating, and I could understand people being frustrated by the Kraken not making moves to add to a team that's trying to make this playoff push, it is a team that has very good depth, as we've mentioned throughout the season. And part of that good depth means that they just don't have as much to gain by making trades as other teams without as good of depth do. I mean, they still definitely could gain by adding a player like some of the ones we've seen traded so far. Fortunately, at least most of the trades have gone players moving from the Western Conference to the Eastern Conference, so the Kraken don't have to worry too much about Western teams getting stronger for this playoff push around them. And on top of that, as I've already mentioned a couple of times before in different videos, this is a Kraken team that is kind of playing with house money right now. And yes, we want them to make the playoffs, and it would be nice to see them reward this group by making that move to go a little bit more in on this season. But at the same time, it's still probably not a group that's realistically ready to be a favorite, at the very least, to make the Stanley Cup final. Now, once you're in the playoffs, anything can happen. But this is still a team that's set up well for the future and making these next 5 years be even better than what this year is. So there is that balance there of doing what's right for trying to take advantage of how good the team's been this year, as well as not mortgaging the future to go all in on a season that in the grand scheme, you're probably not looking at being your best season in the next 5 or more years, especially with, as we've already talked about, your best player being 20 years old. Anyway, with that being said, again, I'd love to hear your thoughts about that as well in these next couple of videos before the trade deadline on Friday. And if you made it to this point, thank you very much for watching. If you did like or enjoyed this video and the Kraken getting back to winning, there's buttons for that kind of stuff down below that help support the channel, so I appreciate you using them. And until next time, stay safe out there, be good to each other, bless and go Kraken.